Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I will be looking at the weekend of December the 20th and 21st, 2025. And this weekend is the solstice. It is the shortest day in the Northern Hemisphere, the longest day in the Southern Hemisphere. It is that point where the sun moves into Capricorn. So, it is a time that is spiritually charged, and it has a sort of long tradition. The solstice, in the sort of the Celtic calendar, that was a day which always was of great significance. And if you have come across Robert Graves and the White Goddess, he talks about the solstice as being a time when the old king is sacrificed, and he goes into quite sort of gruesome detail into what happens to the king. So the king is chosen. He has a deputy, and at the time of a winter solstice, the king is torn apart, and he is replaced with his deputy. And then 6 months later, at the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, the deputy is in turn ripped apart, and then the whole cycle continues. And the precise moment of the solstice, the exact moment when the sun hits sort of peak declination, that is the time that we are looking at. And it is a precise moment. It's an infinitesimally small moment, and we have an exact time when the sun moves into Capricorn. And so it's a good idea to set up a chart for that moment and to interpret it, because it's a gateway. It's a gateway for the entire universe, the cosmos, the energies of the solar system to sort of flood down into this material sphere on which we are living. And so, we can get an idea about what this new energy is by looking at the chart. And of course, if we are, awake and are aware of that precise moment, then we might be able to sort of tune into whatever is going on around us. But before I look at the solstice in detail, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend. So here is the chart for the weekend, set for midnight on December the 21st, New York time. So this chart is sort of halfway through the weekend, midnight on Sunday. So at that halfway point, the moon is in Capricorn, of course, set for New York. So the moon goes into Capricorn on when does this moon go into Capricorn? I make it that it goes into Capricorn at 4:53 on Sunday morning, London time. So if you're in the United States, then late on Friday the moon goes into Capricorn. So for most of us, it's going to be a sort of moon in Capricorn weekend. Just after the new moon, because we have the new moon late on Friday, perhaps early on Saturday, because that new moon takes place, remember, at 28 Sagittarius. Pretty shortly after the new moon, we get the sign change. Moon goes into Capricorn. And things change. And when you've got moon moving into Capricorn, what this does mean is that we've got a second personal planet in Earth signs, because we've already got Mars in Capricorn, and now we've got the moon there as well. So with this sort of Capricorn energy, it might be that some of us will start to settle down. Things aren't quite so Sagittarius as they used to be. Now we've only got 3 planets in Sagittarius. So this Sagittarius build-up that we've been seeing over the last few weeks is now, well, it's reached peak now, and it reached peak with the new moon, and sort of now you've got the beginning of the Capricorn season. And so, with the moon in Capricorn, we can say the usual things about Capricorn, moon in Capricorn. It might be a weekend where some of us are thinking about our own needs and realizing that maybe it is a zero-sum world in which we're living. We can be as idealistic as we like, but there are going to be winners and losers, and we are going to have to look after our own interests, especially as the moon is making a conjunction to Mars. So, moon conjunct Mars, you could say that aspect is quite defensive. We want to look after, we do want to look after our own best interests. We want to do whatever is needed to safeguard ourselves and those that are important to us. So that's not the only thing, of course, going on over the weekend, the moon moving into Capricorn. We also have the Sun making a square to Neptune and Venus making a square to Saturn. So, Sun square Neptune. We've just had Sun square Saturn earlier in the week, and now we've got Sun square Neptune. So, Sun in Sagittarius, square Neptune in Pisces. That could represent moments of confusion, not really being sure how things are going to work out. And, we want to apply ourselves, we want to be assertive, but it's just somehow rather difficult. There are so many misleading signals. And then we've got Venus square Saturn. And, Venus square Saturn is an aspect which isn't necessarily easy. I mean, it can be, quite harsh, and it can be about people looking after their own interests. So having moon in Capricorn and Venus square Saturn, you have two astrological signatures of a transactional approach. So when people interact with each other, it's not just some sort of easygoing affair. You have the parties, calculating. How are you going to benefit from this particular interaction? You can't just do things, just out of the kindness of your heart. You do have to think about your own benefits and how you might lose, how you might gain. I mean, I know that doesn't sound very nice. Maybe you can avoid this transactionalism, but you might notice it, in other people. But maybe if we're completely honest about it, every relationship does have a transactional nature, and there are benefits and costs, and those benefits and costs can relate to money, security, status, a whole gamut of things. So I do think that as the weekend progresses, things do get more transactional, and this is because we've got the moon moving into Capricorn. We've also moving through Capricorn, and also because of this square between Venus and Saturn. And Venus square Saturn, may not be great for relationships. It depends on the situation, but there's somehow a lack of emotion, a lack of compassion. I'm not saying that's always going to be the case. We do have Jupiter in Cancer, but we don't have any personal planets in Cancer in water signs now. We've got Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. We've got Jupiter in Cancer. So we've got some outer planets in water signs, but nothing personal. And with Venus square Saturn, things may be somewhat harsh. And probably the most important event of the weekend is the solstice. I mean, it is the longest day. Sunday is the longest day. Or if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, if you're in Australia, Sunday is the longest day. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the shortest day. And with the Sun moving into Capricorn, it is a major change. I know it happens every year. Sun moving into Capricorn, just before Christmas. But we have to look at the nature of Sun moving into Capricorn. What else is happening at that moment? And this is one of the things I'm going to be doing in this video, at the end of this video, looking at what the solstice really means, because I do think that it is an important event. So that's the picture in sort of set the weekend for New York. If we set the weekend for Sydney, Australia, noon in Sydney, so at sort of midnight on Sunday, the moon is still in Capricorn. So wherever you are, Sunday the moon is in Capricorn throughout the day, including in Australia. If you're thinking about things that are earlier in the day, well, at the beginning of a weekend, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, up until the sort of mid-late afternoon on Saturday, the moon will be in Sagittarius, and so moon, in Sagittarius, well, it's pretty close to the new moon. So, a Saturday could be a very different day from Sunday. Very much a new day, a new moon day in Australia and New Zealand, and perhaps quite a Sagittarian day, just in spite of the new moon, in spite of the fact that the moon is square Neptune. There may be things you want to do, and there could be a certain sense of excitement which may not be around if you're in the Americas. So perhaps a slightly different emphasis in Australia compared to the United States, but I don't think it's anything major. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And there you can see that at midnight on Sunday, the Earth is at 2934 Gemini. And of course, the heliocentric Earth is always exactly opposition the geocentric Sun. So, the Sun is about to move into Capricorn. Therefore, the Earth is about to move into Cancer. And when the Earth moves into Cancer, it will be making a square to Saturn and Neptune. So that might be something we feel sort of towards the end of the weekend and into early next week. So Earth square Saturn, Earth square Neptune. I mean, that's not really a bundle of laughs, is it? I mean, particularly Earth square Saturn, and it's an aspect that, sure, it happens twice a year, but you have to look at what else is going on. And so having Earth square Saturn, Earth square Neptune, I think that there are some difficulties there, and in terms of what people are doing. Well, a lot of people are very unsure of themselves, and that is because of that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is still very much around us. And so with the Earth making the square to Saturn and Neptune, that might represent sort of extra levels of insecurity. But it's nothing personal. It's nothing that we as individuals have to worry about too much. Earth is always also making a trine to Mercury. I mean, it's a trine that maybe sort of particularly on Saturday. So Earth trine Mercury. There may be a lot to say. Maybe the words will come out relatively easily. I mean, particularly if we're talking about something important and we're expressing what's really happening around us. But I don't want to make sort of too much of a big deal about it. I don't think that the heliocentric chart is telling us anything of sort of major significance, and I think that we can probably sort of just focus on what's going on geocentrically. So let me now move on to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of December the 20th and 21st, 2025. Aries, there is a change going on. It's been taking place over the course of a weekend, and maybe it all started, with the new moon. You realized that something had shifted, and you perhaps were waiting for something new to come into your life, and perhaps now it's starting. And what we've got over the weekend is the moon moving into Capricorn. Mars is already in Capricorn, and the Sun is getting ready to move into Capricorn. And so somehow, Aries, you perhaps are becoming more focused, and you are starting to consider what is important and what are your priorities. And this can be a time of year, Aries, when you can be fairly ambitious. You're thinking about what you need to do, and perhaps you might feel that time has been wasted, that you could have been more proactive. But now things are changing, and you're realizing that there is something that has to be done. And I think that you already felt this with Mars moving into Capricorn. Mars moving into a high profile part of your chart, very much focused on you in the world. And now with Moon moving into Capricorn as well, it's becoming clear. You can spend as much time as you like thinking and philosophizing and having different ideas, but at a certain point things have to stop. The discussions have to stop. The philosophizing has to be cut down, and you have to think about, well, what actually is going to happen now, in the here and now. And this might be what you're thinking over the course of a weekend, that you have to make an impact. And I feel sure that you can make an impact, because things, as I said, things are changing. We're moving from a sort of a Sagittarius emphasis. We had 4 planets in Sagittarius not so long ago, but now it's all moving on. It's moving into Capricorn, moving into a cardinal sign. So it is very much a time, Aries, when you need to be thinking about what is your next step. And don't get too worried about the fact that it's a weekend, that it's Christmas, the big slowdown before the new year. This shouldn't bother you. And as far as possible, you should just treat things as just a normal day. Maybe the weekend, but it's time, and you don't want to waste time. So if there's something you want to do that's useful, that's practical, that furthers your ambitions, then Aries, I would very much suggest that you get on with it. And with the solstice, the solstice, this time of year, obviously the solstice is always in Capricorn, the winter solstice from a Northern Hemisphere perspective. It is a time where things really are focused, and having a solstice right next to Mars, I think it's quite empowering. It makes you realize that perhaps it is your time. You've been trying to align yourself to your environment, I think, for some time, and it hasn't always been easy, but now it's becoming much clearer. So if you feel that there is something that needs to be done, something you want to do, then I would suggest that you get on with it. And in the process, maybe it's a time when you have to be open and upfront. I think, Aries, you're going to be very good at articulating yourself and your needs over the course of a weekend. And if other people don't seem to understand what you want, maybe you can explain yourself, and you can explain what your real priorities are. And I think in most cases you will be just understood, and that's going to allow you to probably move quite quickly. But just don't allow yourself to be distracted. I mean, I know that there are distractions around. We have what do we have? We've got Sun square Neptune. I mean, that Sun square Neptune might affect all of us, you included, and it might be a time when some of us just aren't quite sure where we're going, and we might get distracted. We might get caught up in some delusion. But you, Aries, I think it's unnecessary, especially as Mars is now in Capricorn and the Moon is making a conjunction to Mars. And this Moon conjunct Mars, it's it's quite a forceful conjunction. It can make you impatient. It can, also encourage you to sort of argue your point of view, whatever that point of view is. And because the Moon Mars conjunction is in Capricorn, you can do it in a sort of a slow, systematic kind of way. And in the end, people are going to listen. I don't think you're going to have to lose your temper or raise your voice. I think that your priorities, will be very clear this weekend. Now, I must emphasize that, it is a weekend and it's, supposed to be a time for relaxation and for not feeling that you have to accomplish anything. But, I must also emphasize that this time round it may be different. That if you just do nothing, then it might be a waste, because I think it's important that you're able to see things through. It's so easy to get distracted right now, but Aries, things are changing, and they are changing for the better, and you can't allow yourself to be sort of tied up with what other people are doing, what other people are suggesting. You can be seasonal up to a point, but you don't want to get completely overwhelmed by it all, because I think you have an agenda. And if you've got an agenda, I think it's probably important that you see it through. Taurus. Venus is your ruler, and Venus is making a square aspect to Saturn. Now, Venus square Saturn is an aspect that perhaps has a rather difficult reputation. When one thinks of Venus square Saturn, we think about something just being blocked. It just doesn't have any self-expression. It's perhaps keeping things to itself, or it might be that you just think that the environment is not suitable. You might try to be yourself, but something is saying, no, you can't do that. Something is trying to restrict you. And so, Taurus, I think it would be a good idea to ask, what that might be. It is possible that some people are not being helpful. It being a weekend, you might want to socialize, you might want to meet with your friends, other people. It seems a good idea. But with that Venus square Saturn, what seems to be straightforward could become complicated. And you might find that certain people are really restricting your freedom of action. Or maybe they're also being judgmental. They're telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing. And your first inclination might be to take what you're being told seriously. But, you do have to think about your own boundaries and also your own freedom. And you don't want to be in a position where you are being held back. Though it is quite possible, Taurus, with this Venus square Saturn, that you are holding yourself back. You might decide to interpret other people's behavior as being judgmental when it's not judgmental at all. So, ask yourself, what does someone really mean? Are you sure they're being negative? Are you sure they're not encouraging you? You might feel discouraged with Venus square Saturn, but maybe nothing's going on. Maybe you're imagining it. Maybe you're just taking things too seriously. So don't get completely caught up on this Venus square Saturn. So that's looking at Venus square Saturn in a sort of quite a negative way. But there is a positive side to Venus square Saturn. Venus square Saturn may be about you having an opportunity to really sort of get yourself together, to think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and making sure that you're being properly rewarded and also getting appreciated. Everything has a cost, and in general, people aren't quite as charitable as they claim to be, and everything is done for a reason. So if you are around other people, you're interacting with other people, ask yourself, what does that other person want from you? So if someone's being friendly, why? Why are they being friendly? These questions, one thinks one shouldn't ask them. It kind of goes against the Christmas spirit, might do. But that is the nature of humanity. We are very often transactional. And I think that this Venus square Saturn is a transactional aspect where there is an exchange. If you do something nice for someone, and you expect something in return. And that's just the way it is. And I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. And so as far as relationships are concerned with Venus square Saturn, it may be difficult to entirely let go, to just be yourself, be with another person. Everything's just easy and relaxed and so forth. With Venus square Saturn, relaxation could be difficult, and if you spend too long with another person, just one other person, it's possible they get you down. I mean, Venus square Saturn can be quite a repressive influence. So I would urge you not to take that Venus square Saturn too seriously, and the best way of doing that is to just be careful how you get on with people. And maybe you shouldn't spend too long with any one person, because certain people do have the capacity to hold you back, and instead you maybe need to sort of rise above things. I mean, there are planets moving into Capricorn. I mean, Mars is already in Capricorn, the Moon is moving into Capricorn, the Sun is moving into Capricorn. After all, it is the solstice. And so, Taurus, perhaps you should not get caught up on other people's words and actions, and instead you should think about where do you want to go? Where is the next stage? And that change about thinking about what is possible compared to thinking about why things can't be done. So that might be the initial state, maybe right at the beginning of a weekend, thinking about why you're being held back, and then thinking about what can you actually discover, because it is an exciting world out there. And just because you're excited about something doesn't mean that thing can't be of material value. Indeed, it's quite possible that things that are inspirational can also be useful, because they're encouraging you to use your abilities in a new way. And the concept of freedom might be creeping into proceedings. Your freedom. I think that many Taurans at the moment feel that things could be better, and maybe there's a particular issue that's been bugging you, that's just been hanging around for a long time, and maybe now is the time to make a clean break from it. And if you do make a clean break, then Taurus, there might be a great sense of relief. Gemini, you're beginning to appreciate that not everything is simple, and not everybody is simple. Some people can be extremely complicated. You thought it would be easy. You thought that there would be good channels of communication, but still you don't entirely know what other people are thinking, and you're having to guess. And it's possible that some people are making things more complicated than they should be, and that to an extent is the way it is. There's not a great deal you can do about it. So the question, Gemini, is how complicated do you want things to be? I mean, you can make things very complicated particularly if you insist on having a busy schedule this weekend, if you insist on spending a lot of time with other people, maybe moving from one person to another person and working out the details of another person's personality and their motivations. It is complicated, and it just can become just more complicated than it should be. So it might start with just dealing with another person, and it seems quite straightforward the way you deal with this other person, and then you begin to realize, well, not necessarily. It wasn't so simple, and the more you associate with other people, the more complicated they become. So you don't want to get caught in this sort of escalating pattern of complications, and I don't really think it's necessary. So it could be, Gemini, that you need to value your own independence and your own space. Do you need to have other people around you? Do you need to share things with them? It might seem a nice idea to share things, but sometimes what a trouble shared is a trouble doubled. It can be the case. It can be like that. And many things can become complicated. I mean, money can become complicated. There may be complex agreements, things you don't fully understand, and you can start to see the beginning of this, and you are realizing that but nothing is simple. And as planets move into Capricorn, as they move out of Sagittarius, this does become very clear to you. And of course, on Sunday we have got the Winter Solstice from a Northern Hemisphere's perspective, when the Sun moves into Capricorn. And with the Sun moving into Capricorn, it's kind of like the new moon changes its focus. So we had a new moon sort of late on Friday, early on Saturday in Sagittarius, but then the Sun and the Moon both move into Capricorn. So it's like the new moon started in one sign and then decides to shift into another sign, shifts into Capricorn. And with that shift, you realize that this new beginning is a new beginning, might be about new complications. But just because something is complicated doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, you can gain a great deal from things that are complicated, because you're starting to see how things really are, and perhaps you have the motivation to really get to understand something. And one reason you might want to understand something is because you want to improve your position. You don't like to be ignorant of anything. I mean, being a Gemini, ignorance is just not something you appreciate. Geminis hate being ignorant. And if they realize that they're ignorant, or I'm not saying you are ignorant, by the way, I've got my sun in Gemini, so I'm kind of maybe talking to myself. So if you realize you're ignorant about something, that does give you the impetus to do something about it. And you really do have this impetus. Gemini, you want things to be better. You want to do things as well as possible. And the best way of excelling is to understand, and to understand things at many different levels, not just the factual level, but also the emotional and the material level. Some things are obvious, and maybe they're so obvious you're not prepared to accept it, but you have the ability now to just looking at things in a new way, maybe a more complicated way. But if you have the knowledge and you have the understanding, in the end, it's absolutely got to work in your favor. Cancer. We have a conjunction between the Moon and Mars this weekend. So this Moon-Mars conjunction seems to be on Saturday. So at the beginning of the weekend, this Moon-Mars conjunction in Capricorn, in your opposite sign. Of course, Capricorn is opposite to Cancer, so this Moon-Mars conjunction could stir you up. It could make you annoyed. It might well be the case that some people are genuinely annoying. They can do things that are really quite irritating. And the question is, how do you respond? I mean, with the Moon making a conjunction to Mars, there is a possibility that you you respond in, in quite an extreme way. You are prepared to reveal your anger and your irritation, and once you do that, well, everything changes. People might get irritated back. The atmosphere takes a dive. Is this what you want to achieve? Is this what you're planning? Sometimes it has to be done. If you feel that you have no choice, then maybe it's best that you say something, that you force people to listen. But yeah, there is always a price, because not everyone can handle that. And maybe Cancer, there is an argument for not doing a great deal, not feeling you have to do anything, and instead just trying to understand what is happening. And that might mean giving other people a bit of control. You can take that control back, but short term, maybe people need to be given the freedom and the space to do to an extent what they like, and then them having done their best, or perhaps done their worst, you'll be in a position to make a judgment, make a decision, and decide what exactly you want to do. And if things do go wrong, if people are angry, then try as far as is possible not to take it too seriously, and also maybe consider your role in the matter. You might think that you're just being an objective observer, that you have no impact on in terms of what other people are doing. But is it actually possible to be an objective observer? Probably not. As soon as you're observing something, you're influencing it. As soon as you're getting close to people, as soon as you start watching people, as soon as they know you're watching them, as soon as they're aware of your presence, you start to create a change. And you have to ask yourself, well, what kind of change is that? Is that what you were, really looking for? Now, one thing going on over the weekend is that the sun is moving into Capricorn, because it's a solstice. That's what happens at the time of the solstice. Well, the summer solstice, from a perspective of the Northern Hemisphere, the sun goes into Cancer. Winter solstice, it goes into Capricorn. So, by the end of the weekend, we have 3 planets in Capricorn. We have 3 planets in your opposite sign. And, soon enough we'll have, we have 4. Well, Mercury will go into Capricorn in the end, but of course, by the time Mercury moves into Capricorn, Venus will move into Capricorn in the end, but by the time Venus moves into Capricorn, the moon will be out of Capricorn and I assume in Aquarius. But with this Capricorn emphasis, this growing Capricorn emphasis, some people are just difficult to avoid, and it just may be best to just give people a chance. Just let them be annoying. Up to a point. I mean, you obviously don't want to be in a position where anyone is taking liberties. I mean, that would not be a particularly good idea. Leo, we have the sun making a square to Neptune. So the sun is your ruler. And so we've got the sun in late Sagittarius, making a square to Neptune in Pisces. And this sun square Neptune may be confusing. I mean, you just had sun square Saturn a few days ago. Sun squared Saturn, I talked about it when I was doing the Leo horoscopes. I was indicating that it may not be entirely straightforward. It may mean that you have to deal with certain obstacles, and then you've got sun square Neptune. So sun square Neptune, it could perhaps be a somewhat disintegrating force. It can just make it difficult to get anything done. You put a lot of energy into things, but where does that energy go? And if you try too hard in one particular direction, it might all come to nothing. So, Leo, you don't, with the Sun square Neptune, you don't want to exhaust yourself. If you find that you absolutely must do something, then ask yourself, how far are you going to go? How far are you going to take it? And what is the toll? And you just might get, you might get confused by something. There's something you might be confused with. It might be something outside, around you, maybe another person, but it also could be you yourself. You yourself, trying to make sense of it, perhaps getting tripped up by your own emotions. It's always good to have emotions, but sometimes, emotions can get trapped, and they can get distorted and twisted. And so maybe, Leo, if things are too emotional, then that might create a situation where you're not really functioning properly. And instead, Leo, perhaps you should make some effort to create order. Not everyone is behaving correctly. I think that some people are a law unto themselves. They think they can largely do what they want. But you, Leo, I think you get it all. I think you understand, what can be done, what should be done. And, right now, deep down, you have a sense of right and wrong. And if you want to discuss this sense, if you tell someone that they're making a mistake, or they're going against the law of a land, or going against, I don't know, some local code, then I think your command of the facts and perhaps the legislation is going to be very good. So if you are in a situation where you are trying to stop something because it is illegal, because it breaks a code, I think you'll be quite good at it. And maybe also, if other people are confused about the law, confused about what they can and cannot do, I think that for some reason, Leo, you might be very good at just putting them to right, just telling them what can be done, what can't be done. And I think that you'll be able to give very good advice. I mean, serious advice, and this perhaps indicates that there is a seriousness to you. It's not just all about Sun square Neptune. And maybe your understanding of what can be done, maybe in a legal sense, is kind of an antidote to the Sun square Neptune. I mean, Sun square Neptune might encourage you to do all sorts of things, but deep down what can and cannot be done. You know where the line lies. You know what it means to do something which is illegal, or to break a set of laws, to break a set of conventions. You understand all of that, and maybe you'll have a chance to actually sort of use this understanding. Now, one thing that is happening this weekend for sure, it's not just Sun square Neptune. The Sun is changing sign, and so for a Leo, that is important. The Sun is your ruler. The Sun has been in Sagittarius for the last month. It's now moving into Capricorn. That does create a change. And so, while the Sun was in Sagittarius, that was, quite a good place for the Sun to be. I mean, the Sun, it rules the fire signs by day, because Jupiter rules the fire signs by night. But while the Sun was in Sagittarius, I think you were on pretty good form, I hope. And now that the Sun is moving into Capricorn, perhaps it's time to slow down. Over the next few weeks, you don't have to do everything. And of course, the Sun moves into Capricorn, every year, but it's not all the time. That Mars is in Capricorn as well, and of course we've got Venus moving into Capricorn very soon. In fact, we've got Mercury moving into Capricorn at the beginning of next month. And so, as far as the Sun is moving into Capricorn is concerned, it just is about sort of a change of emphasis. You realize that it's all very well being spontaneous, but you've got to make sure that things are sorted out. you create a complication, and having created that complication, you have to do something to deal with it. You have to create a framework in order to deal with, to deal with what you have just put into action. And so what might be needed is just a sense of order, and that is a concept we can really think about in terms of Capricorn. Capricorn is about order, and it's structure, and it's about structure. And so Leo, it's not enough to just be creative. You have to do something that just fits in and is done properly. And you don't want to do anything too random or chaotic or unplanned. But I don't think that's going to happen, because I think that you will allow yourself to be structured by this new Capricorn influence, and that means that the Sun square Neptune, it's a dangerous aspect potentially. It is an aspect that could get confused, but I think that the Sun moving into Capricorn, that will come to the rescue as soon as the Sun moves into Capricorn, the difficulties of the Sun square Neptune start to subside. And so I think by the end of a weekend, Capricorn, by the end of a weekend, Leo, I think that you should be in firm control. Virgo. We have the moon in an earth sign, and we've already got Mars in an earth sign. We've got the Sun about to move into an earth sign. Of course, that earth sign is Capricorn. But you, being a Virgo, you appreciate the earth signs. You understand that certain things need to be done in an orderly way, that they need a degree of structure. And so you have an opportunity to bring things down to earth, but in such a way that is creative. Just because you bring something down to earth doesn't mean you're being boring. Not at all. You can actually involve yourself in things which are interesting, which are a fundamental expression of who you are. And you can ground it all, and in the process you can be very creative. And we're talking about a creativity which isn't vague. It's real creativity. You doing something special that probably no one else can do. And at the same time, Virgo, you're not satisfied with second best. It's often said that Virgos can be perfectionists, and being a perfectionist can have its problems. I mean, one can go crazy being a perfectionist, but there is always a place for perfectionism. And I think that this weekend, there's no harm in trying to do something as well as possible. Really try to do a good job. So if you are engaged in an activity, it shouldn't be second best. Give it your best shot. And I think that if you can do that, I think that you can really create something quite remarkable. I'm not saying that as in an exaggerated way. You know what you're good at, and if you focus on what you're good at, and you just keep moving, and you're perhaps rather ruthless with yourself. I don't want you to completely exhaust your energy, but there is a place for really struggling to not just do something, but to do it well. And I think that you can actually hit sort of a level of excellence. So that's something you can do this weekend. And in the process, you're going to very much enjoy what you're doing, or at the very least, you're going to be able to get a great deal of satisfaction from it. So I think it's worth pushing yourself over the course of a weekend, and really trying to do as much as possible. I don't think you want to exhaust yourself, but really see what you can do. I think that there is, in the end, going to be quite a big payoff for you if you can take that approach. Libra, this weekend there may be a certain amount of restraint. It's like, Libra, you may be sort of holding something back that you don't necessarily want to go the whole way. Whatever it is you're trying to do, whatever it is you're working on, or perhaps you're trying to enjoy yourself, there's just something pulling you back. And it may be the fact that Venus is making a square to Saturn. Venus is your ruler. It's making a square to Saturn. And so, you might like to sort of go forward. You might like to just be light and free. But Saturn's saying, no, you can't necessarily do that. What might go wrong? What might happen? And maybe you need to be more careful. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be overly cautious, but that might nonetheless be the way you feel, and especially as we've got planets moving into Capricorn. We've got Moon moving into Capricorn, we've got Mars already in Capricorn, we've got the Sun getting ready to move into Capricorn. It is the solstice, and so with these planets in Capricorn, they can have the effect of sort of bringing you down to earth, making you want to do things which are sort of stable and secure, and not necessarily wanting to take a chance. I mean, why would you want to take a chance? And that might be your broad attitude to the weekend, just feeling that this is a time when you need to keep things to yourself, when you certainly shouldn't be taking risks. But also, Libra, you are going to value your freedom. You don't want to be tied up in knots. You don't want to be obliged to anyone, even if it's your family or close friends. You want to be a free spirit, and you want to keep your options open. And I think that is something you can do, and you shouldn't make assumptions about how difficult something might be. So there might be something that you've been worrying about for some time, and you might have thought that it's a really big problem and you can't get round it. But maybe it's not quite as bad as you thought. And if you do some exploration and you ask some questions, you might find out that what you thought was a real difficulty is just nothing. It might require some effort, but it's just not the big deal you thought it was. So, over the weekend, there is a possibility that at some stage you can find some comfort. No, more than comfort. Once you're familiar with the facts, you know that there is a way forward. There is perhaps an escape route. So if there's something you've been dreading, something you feel has just completely tied you up, then you can break free from it. And maybe if you want to break free from something, the best way of doing that is to separate yourself from other people, from unnecessary elements, things that you don't, strictly speaking, need. And in that way you can really be a free spirit, and perhaps really that's what you should be aiming for over the course of a weekend. Scorpio. Mars is still in Capricorn. Mars is of course your ruler. It's very strong in Capricorn. It's exalted in Capricorn, but it's not alone anymore. Planets are joining Mars. We've got the Moon moving into Capricorn. We've got the Sun moving into Capricorn. It is the solstice after all. So with these planets moving into Capricorn, I think that's good. With all these planets in Sagittarius, it might have felt a bit uneasy. It's not quite what you wanted, and you were having to worry about things that you didn't really need to worry about. But it was still a bother. I mean, maybe some of those concerns were of a financial nature, but now that planets are moving into Capricorn, you possibly have more freedom, and maybe also you're better able to express yourself and tell other people how you feel. be able to talk about things at your own pace. You don't have to, say a great deal. You don't have to reveal much, but there is scope here for being able to talk in an easygoing way, and you can, to a great extent, choose, what to say, how to say it, the pace of revelation. I mean, it's not that you have to reveal anything, but if you do want to reveal some things, you can do it in a slow, methodical way. And I think that you're certainly helped by the fact that Mars is in Capricorn. Though, if you want to take things further, if you want to show people how you feel, if you want to maybe demonstrate your annoyance, then I think you can. I mean, it's sometimes necessary to show your annoyance, and there is a Moon Mars, conjunction this weekend, and the moon in Capricorn. I mean, I know that the moon is, in Capricorn, is it's in its detriment in Capricorn, but I think that from a Scorpio point of view, I don't think that's such a problem. I think the moon in Capricorn is maybe quite a fortunate influence, especially because it's conjunct Mars. And I think that you might find that you're able to just be yourself, say what's on your mind, and there is going to be a freedom of expression there. And if you want to get annoyed, if you want to get angry, I think you can. And at the same time, you are going to be able to keep a certain control over the situation. You're not going to go over the top. Now, as far as other people are concerned, there is a square between Venus and Saturn, and this Venus-Saturn square, well, it might say something about other people, and it could say several things. One way of looking at it is Venus square Saturn could be other people who are maybe trying to exercise some control over you. That's what Venus Saturn can mean. Someone who is trying to be influential. They're trying to restrict and limit, but I don't think, Scorpio, that you have to worry about this. I mean, you have quite a lot of freedom over the course of a weekend, and if anyone is trying to restrict your freedom of action, you're able to push back. So you don't need to worry about that. But Venus square Saturn might also indicate a person who, at some level, feels sorry for themselves. Something's bothering them, something's worrying them. And if that is the case, then maybe you can do something about it. Being a Scorpio, you're quite sensitive. You can sort of feel out another person's problems, what's bothering someone, and maybe you have a chance to sort of untangle other people's issues. You don't have to put yourself out, but maybe it's just a question of doing a bit of listening, a bit of feedback, giving some advice, and that could really help another person in terms of getting them together and sort of getting them back on the path. So do monitor other people and how they are behaving, and ask yourself what might be bothering them, because in your own way it's possible that you could have quite a healing influence. Sagittarius. Planets are leaving Sagittarius. Sagittarius is past peak for this year. You did have 4 planets in Sagittarius, but now, well, by the end of the weekend, it's going to be down to 2, because Moon is leaving Sagittarius, when Mars has already left Sagittarius. The Sun is getting ready to leave. It's a solstice, it's a winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. That is when the Sun moves out of Sagittarius and moves into Capricorn. And so, this is a time when, maybe the spotlight is moving away from you. You're not getting quite so much attention, and that might well be a good thing. It can be exhausting if everyone is looking at you, if they have expectations, and you're supposed to do things, you're supposed to respond. Perhaps you're also supposed to take the initiative. But no, I think that you are starting to be left alone, and so you've still got Mercury and Venus in Sagittarius. It's not like Sagittarius is completely de-emphasized, but it's just not quite as powerful as it used to be. And with these planets moving into Capricorn, that might encourage you to think about what do you need to do to see things through. You can have great ideas, you can be very inspired, but perhaps you need something else, and maybe you need some kind of grounding and support, and you need to have a plan, and you need to make sure that you've got what it takes to see your potential through. So that might be something that you do want to think about as these planets move into Capricorn. And so, as far as broadly speaking, what kind of weekend is it going to be? I think it's going to be a weekend where it might be a good idea to have a certain sense of detachment. I don't think that you need to be involved in things at an emotional level. And also, I don't think you need to take anything too seriously. I mean, it's easy to take things seriously, to regard everything as being a matter of life and death. But really, over the weekend, you have the ability to just disengage. And disengage doesn't mean that you don't care. You're disengaging your passions. Some things are just not worth getting passionate about. Passion can be the source of misery. So the more you're involved with something, the more potential there is to being sort of let down. And if you just have an objective approach, you are at a distance from everything, you're going to inevitably feel much happier. And I mean, I know it's almost like a sort of a Buddhist truism, isn't it? We should have detachment, and of course it's difficult to find detachment. I mean, it's impossible if you're me. But then I'm sort of at a sort of fairly lowly spiritual level. One can only aspire to be the Buddha. But if you can create some distance, I think that really would make things a lot easier. I mean, and it's certainly something that you can aspire to, and probably that's all there is to be said about the weekend. And and as far as relationships are concerned, don't take people too seriously. With Venus square Saturn, some people are being difficult. They've got their own issues. Maybe they're trying to dump their issues onto you, but I wouldn't worry about it. You can just be detached, and I think that Sagittarius is the right approach. Capricorn, your sign is becoming more prominent. You've already got Mars in Capricorn. The moon is moving into Capricorn. The sun is moving into Capricorn. By definition, it's the solstice this weekend when the sun moves out of Sagittarius into Capricorn. So that really does put the emphasis on you. It is the Capricorn season. It is starting, and this means, Capricorn, that you can be, I would have said, fairly dynamic, and you can think about what is important to you and how you want to proceed with your agenda. And I think you have an agenda. You should be having an agenda. You should be thinking about all the things that you want to achieve, that you indeed can achieve, and you can increasingly present yourself as quite a powerful person who will be, taken seriously. And if you want to be powerful, you have to break free from anything holding you back. And the concept of freedom this weekend really could be quite important. You don't want to be held back, and you're not going to want to be too obliged, because there could be feelings of obligation. You perhaps might feel that you're obliged to be at another person's disposal. If someone asks for help, you're obliged to give them that help. If you've got some responsibility, you're obliged to execute it. But you don't want to be over obliged. I think that really is important. And over the weekend, you have a chance to break free of something, and maybe that's really what you should be striving to do. And we know it is the solstice, and I think that at the time of the solstice, as the sun starts to move into Capricorn, it's kind of a time of reversal, isn't it? It's a reversal, like when people perhaps start to see you in a different light. There is a stereotypical Capricorn, isn't there? Of a stereotypical Capricorn of the astrology textbooks and cookbooks is someone who is serious and very disciplined, and they don't do anything unusual or out of character. But that's just a view, and that can be reversed. Capricorn is capable of being exciting and dynamic, and perhaps even being a little bit irresponsible. I'm not saying that you should be irresponsible, but you maybe have a chance here to confound expectations with the sun moving into Capricorn. Remember that Capricorns are often compared with wine, aren't they? As they get older, they improve, and it's even said that as Capricorns get older, they get younger. And so these sort of positive facets of Capricorn may be that you should really be starting to focus on, with the solstice, and that's perhaps how the solstice can manifest. And if there's anything, Capricorn, that you think is holding you back, that's just been restricting your freedom of action, then now is a great time to break free from it. You really can. And perhaps that breaking free could be symbolized by Venus square Saturn. I mean, Venus square Saturn, which, there is this Venus square Saturn aspect on Sunday. So Venus square Saturn is traditionally seen as quite a difficult aspect, difficult for relationships not working, all sorts of things like that. But Venus square Saturn can be about the breaking of something, maybe a relationship. Maybe there's someone who has been holding you back, hasn't been paying you sufficient respect, and you want to make a change. So if you want to end a relationship, then with that Venus square Saturn, I think now might be a very good time to do it. Or it might not be about ending a relationship. It might be just creating some distance. And I think if you want to create distance from another person or a situation that you just find to not be particularly healthy, then I think that's very much something you can do. Aquarius. Things are starting to change. And one thing that's happening is that we've got planets moving into Capricorn, and so with planets moving into Capricorn, well, it's a reminder that soon enough there'll be planets moving into Aquarius, because Aquarius is a sign following Capricorn, and by the end of, well, think about it, end of January, you've got Mars moving into Aquarius. You've got the Sun moving into Aquarius. So it is starting to happen. So your first impulse, with these planets moving into Capricorn, the sign before Aquarius, might be to take a step back. You're getting ready for something, but you don't want to be involved immediately. And so, many Aquarians might feel that they have to just temporarily withdraw. You've seen what you have to see, but do you really want to take things any further in the short term? Well, probably not, especially as Venus is making a square to Saturn. So, Venus is a planet which can be connected with relationships, and it can be connected, well, with other things like sort of art and sort of aesthetics, and what looks beautiful. But with Venus square Saturn, there is a clash here, and it may be Venus square Saturn means that certain relationships do start to become weaker, that the ties that bind you and another person may be starting to separate, and that in turn could give you more control, and control is important to you. You don't want to be in a position where you have to do something where, I don't know, another person is telling you what to do. You don't want to be in that situation. And if you're involved with something that seems to be restricting your freedom of action, then Aquarius, I think you can, very much do something about it. You don't have to be stuck in one place, and maybe that Venus square Saturn can actually work in your favor. It's about expressing your freedom, and freedom does matter. It really does matter. And so if something has just become a pain, it's become annoying, then you don't have to put up with it. I think in most cases you can really create real distance from it, and perhaps rediscover things about yourself. And if you're into rediscovery, then perhaps you don't need any company, or you don't need much company. So you should perhaps, regard other people as being something you don't necessarily need. And you certainly shouldn't be in a situation where you feel that you're responsible for anything, or you're responsible for another person. Okay, sometimes you are responsible for another person. I mean, sometimes you haven't got a choice. Maybe there are people who are reliant on you, but I think there are some people who you shouldn't have to worry too much about. And it's all about giving yourself as much freedom as is morally possible and acceptable. Pisces. Things are changing. We have planets moving into Capricorn, and so there was this big Sagittarius emphasis, but that's breaking up now. We've got the Moon moving out of Sagittarius into Capricorn. We've got the Sun getting ready to move into Capricorn, and with these Capricorn planets, it may mean that some of your priorities change. It's not enough just to be successful, or to just think about your ambitions, whatever those ambitions might be. Perhaps you want to now think about something else, and you might be thinking about what it's all about. And there could be concepts of purpose. I mean, purpose is important. I mean, we all at some stage ask ourselves, what is it all for? Why are we doing this? Why are we spending so much time on things? Life is short, and so we can't spend too much time obsessing about things that may, in the grand scheme of things, be irrelevant. We've got to move beyond all of that, and maybe that's how it's working for you with these Capricorn planets. Capricorn, I know, is a sign that it often is associated with ambition, but it's not just about ambition. It's about thinking about your broader direction, and how you'd like things to unfold. And really believing that that certain things are possible. And if you think about possibilities, you're talking about things which are really quite profound, and it's what perhaps you're born to do, and that's the best you can do. I mean, if you have a purpose and you're able to fulfill that purpose, then what more can you do? That's it. I mean, that's the limit. And so you can probably start to relax, not get so caught up in the here and now, and be thinking about the broader picture, and in the process losing some of your seriousness. I mean, I know that Pisces is traditionally not a particularly serious sign, but but Saturn is in Pisces at the moment, and Venus is making a square to Saturn, and this Venus square Saturn is kind of quite interesting, because it kind of represents something quite transitional. I mean, you're transitioning from having a set of maybe quite crude goals, having aims which they're concrete, but there's something not very subtle about them, and they are rather crude. And crude, when I say crude, I mean crude because they're too material, and you need to sort of transform that. And that maybe that Venus square Saturn is about you understanding the limits of a certain set of ambitions and just wanting to go beyond them. And so I think that is a way in which that aspect could work. On a more down to earth level, that Venus square Saturn might represent issues with authority. Who has the authority? How do you relate to authority figures? How do other people relate to you if you are an authority figure? And so the Venus square Saturn might mean that issues of authority might cause a certain sort of lack of ease. Now, maybe because it's a weekend, if you've got a job and you're not working, maybe that's a good thing, because you don't have to deal with that Venus square Saturn directly. But still, who is in control, and how is that control going to be negotiated? And if anyone really wants to tell you what to do, if someone is pushing you around, I think you're going to be able to defend yourself quite powerfully with that Venus square Saturn. And you maybe can turn the tables on someone. So, for example, if someone is trying to be the authority figure, you can push back against that, and then you yourself become the authority figure. So structures of authority are not necessarily written in stone over the course of this weekend. So now I want to move away from the 12 signs and look at the weekend from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 59, which is dispersion. And from my angle, that seems to be very appropriate, because I'm in Washington State, and it has just been solidly raining. It's just been raining for days on end. And in some parts of the state, there has been flooding. And of course, this hexagram is associated with flooding. It's just a lot of water sort of washing everything away. And so that is a very real interpretation of it. But you're probably not in Washington State. So we have to think about, what does dispersion mean? And dispersion is about a clearing away of things. Things have just started to build up. They got clogged maybe, and it hasn't been very satisfactory. And then the rains come, and it just all goes. And at first, it is difficult when we've got a big storm, and when everything gets cleared out, when everything gets turned upside down. We might, worry for our sanity and our life when everything is getting tossed and turned as if it's in a washing machine. But it's okay. I mean, I Ching ultimately regards dispersion as being, quite a fortunate hexagram, because it does clear away the mess. It cleans everything, and additionally, it can help us move on. We almost get sort of carried away by the floodwater, and we get moved from one place to another, and that movement may actually be progress. Now, this hexagram does not have any moving lines. So because it doesn't have any moving lines, that does kind of limit its power and perhaps takes the edge off it. And in general, it might be a weekend where it does seem that there's a lot that could go wrong, a lot that could be washed away. But does it actually happen? Well, the answer is probably not. So when you are contemplating the weekend, don't necessarily think that the potential that seems to be very sort of present, that potential for everything to be cleared out, that perhaps you have that fear that something might happen, that the dam might break. But no, I don't think I don't think it actually is going to happen. And so if you want to understand dispersion a bit more, we can look at the nuclear hexagram. So, the nuclear hexagram, you can see the nuclear hexagram here, because, if you've got that space in the middle, and so the nuclear, and if we knock out the top and the bottom hexagram, the top and the bottom line, then we find that the nuclear hexagram is hexagram number 27, which is the corners of the mouth. So the corners of the mouth is telling us something about dispersion. And so, what does that actually mean? I would have been inclined to regard the corners of the mouth to be about words in this context, that there are a lot of words. People have been talking a lot. People have been coming up with all sorts of ideas. And words stick. I mean, words can really hurt. And we can get caught on particular words, what we have been saying, what other people have been saying. And that perhaps underlies this hexagram of dispersion. So you perhaps get an image of, people talking, people saying this, people saying that, and then the storms come, then the rain comes along, and the words all get washed away, and people, and maybe they're lost the words, maybe the words are swept out of their mouths and just gone into nothing. So if we go into this weekend with lots of ideas, and we're remembering what's been told to us, and maybe we're trying to explain something, and we're trying to get those words together, and we think we're getting there, but it's hard work, and then suddenly something changes. The storms come, the flooding comes, and it all goes. And perhaps we can then be free from the craziness of our own thoughts and other people's thoughts. And that's perhaps what happens when we're dealing with sort of the raw energy of nature. So words are temporary. I know that they can cause a lot of pain, but words are temporary, and they can be swept away, and that might be what happens this weekend. So now I'm going to finish with the solstice. So let's look at the chart of the solstice. This is the point where the sun moves into Capricorn. So here it is, and I make it that sun moves into Capricorn. Well, set for London, it happens at 3:03 p.m. on Sunday. And there you can see the sun at 00 Capricorn. So that means it's 3:03 p.m. on Sunday, which is going to be 10:03 a.m. on Sunday if you're in New York, 7:03 a.m. if you're in California. If you're in Paris, it will be 4:03 p.m. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, that could be late on Sunday and into Monday. So that will be right at the end of a weekend. And it is a moment of power. That precise moment when the solstice happens, and it is a precise moment. I notice that someone was advertising the fact that they were going to have a solstice walk. When are we going to have a solstice walk? I can't remember, on Saturday or Sunday. But I was thinking to myself, what is the point? I looked at the time they were having a walk. It wasn't even anywhere near the solstice. If you're going to celebrate the solstice, you celebrate the solstice at the moment of the solstice. You don't celebrate it on the day of the solstice, because the solstice is a moment of power, and it's a precise moment. It happens just immediately. One moment the sun is in Capricorn, in Sagittarius. The next moment it's in Capricorn. One moment it's in Sagittarius. The next moment it's Capricorn. It's instantaneous. So you have to be there and present if you want to celebrate the solstice for that precise moment. And when that happens, you have a gateway. You have a gateway to the solar system, and the gateway to everything in the solar system, and more from the solar system. It's just a moment, perhaps, when the spiritual meets the material, when things just flood in, when the energy of the cosmos is with us, for better or for worse. So what is the energy that this particular solstice brings in? It is the shortest day in the Northern Hemisphere, the longest day in the Southern Hemisphere. So whether you're in the north or south of the equator, it doesn't matter. It's still something really very, very important. And so what is going on with this solstice? Well, this solstice is perhaps defined to an extent by the conjunction with Mars. With the sun in Capricorn close to Mars. Okay, it's not exactly conjunct Mars, but I think it's close enough to create real energy. I mean, it's quite an energetic solstice. We want to get things done with that Mars in Capricorn, and it could be quite warlike. Because when we think about the solstice, we also need to think about how is it going to influence the planets, sorry, not the planets, the world at large, nations, politicians, armies. So Sun conjunct Mars, it's really assertive. Let's go, let's act. The question is, how successful are we going to be? Because the Sun is square Neptune. I mean, so there is a real Neptune feel to the solstice. Neptune is just over half a degree from the Aries point, and so Sun square Neptune, you're trying hard to get something done, but how successful are we going to be? I mean, Neptune might sort of break things down and sort of cause a certain amount of confusion. I mean, it is Neptune, after all, and you might also think that this solstice happens at the same time as there is an exact Venus-Saturn square. So that Venus-Saturn square could cast a bit of a shadow over the solstice. The solstice could be about something just not being realized. If there's an emotional side to that Venus square Saturn, Venus square Saturn, people might want to relate, but can they really relate? And so this solstice might really emphasize the fact that some people just are separate, and so the separation of that Venus square Saturn might be sort of also all linked with it. You could say that Venus square Saturn might be connected with the economy. What is the stock market going to do in a new year? But I'm not convinced about that. I think that if we're talking about next year, we're talking about the Jupiter-Saturn trine, and I do think that Jupiter-Saturn trine is going to be quite positive, certainly for the markets. I mean, I think. Of course, we all know that Trump has to pump the markets as much as he can because he's got midterms in November, and he's going to want everyone to feel good about it, so that everyone votes Republican. But we'll have to see what happens. But that's what we see on the surface, and we shouldn't forget that Venus square Saturn. So when I say on the surface, well, there are other things to consider, and I think when you're dealing with the solstice, it's a good idea to look at the midpoint structure of the sun. So, by definition, when you have the solstice, when the sun is at exactly 0 degrees Capricorn, it is exactly square the Aries point. So the sun and the Aries point are going to be indistinguishable in terms of the midpoints they're on. So turning to the midpoints, here they are. Sorry, let me just look at the dial. I don't think you want to see trees. So what we're looking for is the midpoint structure of the sun and the Aries point, because the Aries point is square the solstice point. So yeah, from a midpoint perspective, they're indistinguishable. So these midpoints may help us understand what is being brought in. When this gateway opens, and what we do see is, in terms of these midpoints, it's on the Venus-Mars midpoint. It's making a semi-square or sesquiquadrate to Venus-Mars. It's making a semi-square or sesquiquadrate to the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. But it's also making a semi-square sesquiquadrate to the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And I think that does give cause for concern. So if we look at the midpoint structure of the Sun and the Aries point, there it is. It's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. It's also on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and it's on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. And I do think that it being on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, I think that's a worry. I mean, Aries is about the world at large. Mars and Saturn can be about warfare, destruction, death, frustration, and so with Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, it could be tough at times, and we may be talking a lot of casualties, a lot of people dying. Well, a lot of people are dying anyway. They're always dying. There are always wars. Of course, we have got the war in Ukraine. Zelensky has in his chart. He has, I believe, his Mars-Saturn midpoint is at 15 degrees Leo. So Zelensky has Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and like it or not, I mean, Zelensky has been involved in a war. He didn't do a deal with the Russians at Istanbul in April 2022. He could have done. It was a pretty good deal, certainly a better deal than he's got now, or what he's looking at now. I mean, the situation is far worse, and you could say that Zelensky has got involved in a war that has killed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, and of course a lot of Russians as well. So being part of something which has led to a huge amount of casualties, yeah, I mean, that is one way of looking at it. So one wonders how Zelensky is going to respond to this solstice, which has Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So it kind of reflects something about him. But maybe it's not about Ukraine, just about Ukraine. There are lots of other places where bad things are happening. For example, the sort of Horn of Africa, sort of Sudan, or I don't know, is it not Horn of Africa? Yes, or was it a civil war in Sudan? Who knows what's going to happen in Gaza? So it is quite unpleasant, that Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and it does link with the Venus-Saturn, because we have got here, if we look at, if we've got Venus-Saturn square in the sky on a 90-degree dial. Venus-Saturn square is shown as a Venus-Saturn conjunction, and the Sun and Neptune are on the Venus-Saturn and the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So that is difficult, and additionally, it's on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. So I think this solstice, it could well be quite difficult, and I think there could be a certain amount of sort of death and destruction with this solstice. So there's then the question of where would you expect the solstice to cause the damage? Okay, I've suggested that there is a link between the solstice and Zelensky's chart, because in both cases we see Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and it's kind of reflecting something that Zelensky has in his chart anyway. And of course, he's president of Ukraine, so what goes with Zelensky perhaps also goes with Ukraine. But in terms of the astrocartography, let's look at what's happening with. Well, let's start by looking at the world. So what we're doing is we're really interested in places where where the sun is on the ascendant, or perhaps on the midheaven, and because particularly the sun with all those midpoints. I mean, the sun is on the Aries point, the sun is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So I think those lines where the sun is either rising or setting, or perhaps on the midheaven, are things that we do have to watch out for. And so looking at the world, I hope you can see this. Let's make this a bit bigger, maybe. I can't make it any bigger from that. So here is, you see this line. These are all the places where the sun is setting. So the sunset line goes through northern sort of Madagascar, and it goes through East Africa, goes through Egypt, and then goes into Europe. So there is a chunk of Europe. It looks like the Balkans. But there are other places. I mean, I'll be looking at that in further detail in a moment. So Africa and the Balkans may well be influenced by this. I think it goes through Athens as well, in all of these places that we need to watch out for. Now, the sun is also, it's quite close to Mars, because we've got a Sun-Mars conjunction. So I think the Mars line is worth looking at as well. There is a place where Mars intersects Saturn. I'm not quite sure where exactly that would be. It looks like the Red Sea. You can see something going on here. Maybe that's almost Yemen, or somewhere around the Horn of Africa. Potentially looks quite difficult, more sort of difficult than usual. With Saturn and Mars, Saturn on the midheaven, and Mars on the descendant, and then we can sort of take this up. So that's kind of what I find myself looking at, what I find to be most significant. And so I think it might be a good idea to just look at some of those charts in more detail. So if we then perhaps relocate full moon. So let's start by relocating it to Athens. So this is the solstice in Athens, and so if you set the chart for Athens, you see that the sun is right on the descendant. I mean, it's pretty close to the descendant, and sort of Mars. It's all linked up with Mars as well. So in Athens, I don't know what's going on in Athens. I don't know much about Greece or anything about Greece. I mean, I don't think that the sun on a descendant in Athens is necessarily going to say, oh, we can expect sort of bad things to happen. I don't think it's anything like that. It doesn't strike me as being necessarily a major issue. And we also have to ask, what do we know about Athens? Because that's another way of looking at it. Do we know anything about Greece? But because it's right on the descendant, it just could be that in Greece, there are events which could be destabilizing. Remember, that solstice is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So yeah, maybe Athens is one place that we might want to look at. And if we follow this line through, we get to Vienna. So again, Vienna has Sun on the descendant, and also Mars pretty close to the descendant. In fact, it's got the descendant is on the Sun-Mars midpoint, so there could be events in Austria. I hope they're not tragic events, but I mean, in Austria, I mean, what happens? I mean, occasionally you get stabbings in Austria, or you get events which cause a negative reaction. I mean, Europe is always under pressure, and of course Austria is just another country where people are concerned about immigration and what migrants are doing. I mean, that's just an idea. I mean, when I say an idea, I'm just trying to think, what bad things can happen in Austria. And moving on to other parts of the line, well, we could go to Berlin. So if we go to Berlin, Berlin, Sun and Mars again, both on a descendant, and so we're talking about a swathe going through Europe. Let me just show you what I mean. Let me just look at that astro map, but set it for Europe. There's Europe. Okay, so what I'm talking about is this sun line. You see it goes through Crete, it goes through Athens, goes through the Balkans, goes through Vienna, but it's not just the sun, it's just the Mars as well. So the sun and the Mars are coming together, and they're sort of carving out a swathe through Europe. So this whole arc across Europe does potentially look a bit dangerous with the solstice. And if you look at the Mars line, this goes through Bulgaria. We know that the Bulgarian government had to resign quite recently, and there were mass protests in Bulgaria. So if we set the solstice for Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, we've got 2 degrees Capricorn on a descendant, and so we've got the ascendant-descendant line on the Sun-Mars midpoint. So that really indicates that there's probably not going to be much of a let-up in Bulgaria. We've really quite huge demonstrations in Bulgaria, and so that Sun-Mars is going to really emphasize it. And one place that is hit is Gaza. And so if we look at the solstice for Gaza, here it is. We have got the ascendant at 5 degrees 29 Cancer. So Mars is exactly on the descendant if we set the chart for Gaza. So it could well be the case after the solstice that old troubles start to resurface, and that Mars is very prominent. And of course Tel Aviv is not too far away from from Gaza. So if we take the chart for Tel Aviv, again we've got Mars on the descendant, and I think if we set the chart for Jerusalem, then we're going to see a fairly similar picture. I mean, Israel is a small country after all. So set for Jerusalem. Again, got 6 degrees Capricorn on the descendant. So this solstice, yeah, could intensify things in the Middle East. So I think that's a possibility, something that we do need to be thinking about. So I think that's all I'm going to say about the solstice. I think it could be quite a difficult solstice. I don't think it's necessarily going to be that easy. And I think it's difficult. Well, not least because the solstice is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.